I have been with this company for several years now. I'm an ordinary individual, 31 years old, going about my work, striving to make ends meet. I'm not the type to draw attention to myself, and to be honest, I'm perfectly fine with that. I prefer to avoid any unnecessary conflict. I follow a straightforward routine. Rise and shine, head to the office, tackle my tasks, then return home. Having spent a considerable amount of time in this place, I have a solid grasp of the dynamics at play, yet recently, a particular concern has been weighing on my mind. I find myself in a stagnant role, anticipating a promotion that appears to be perpetually out of reach. It can be quite exasperating, yet I strive to remain unaffected by it. It was merely a typical day in the midst of lunch break. I found myself in the break room alongside my coworker, Sam, engaged in a casual conversation about various topics. Just the typical things, like sports and the daily grind of work. Suddenly, the dialogue shifted direction. I suppose I spoke without considering my words, but Sam had been endlessly expressing his views on how he believed my boss, Mr. Carter, was treating me unjustly. I dismissed it casually and replied, "Sure, it's whatever." If given the opportunity, I would certainly invite his wife out for a date. However, it's important to note that she is married. Sam chuckled, exasperation evident in his gaze. Absolutely, my friend. You would be dismissed immediately. We shared a laugh, and it didn't linger in my thoughts. I had no intention behind it. It was merely a jest. I've noticed Mr. Carter's wife, Margaret, in the office on several occasions, but to be honest, I've never considered her in that light. Is she around 43? Age isn't really a factor, but I always perceived her simply as the boss's wife. Refined, impeccably attired, consistently professional. Not really my kind of person, but I just threw it out there to get a chuckle from Sam. As I took my final bite of the sandwich, I looked up from my phone, and time seemed to freeze. Margaret. She had merely strolled past the break room. Though her gaze was elsewhere, I caught a fleeting look directed at the table. And then, in an instant, her gaze caught mine, lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. I stood still. My stomach sank. She had listened closely. The stillness in the room was almost oppressive as she walked past. For a brief instant, I felt as though I might lose consciousness. What on earth had I done? It was beyond my comprehension. She had overheard my playful remarks about asking her out, and now she was likely considering me a bit odd. How could I have been so foolish? Sam was oblivious to my awareness, and I struggled to articulate a response, something along the lines of, yes, that would indeed be a catastrophe. Yet, as the words left my lips, I was acutely aware that their significance was lost. She had listened to me. I had no idea what was coming my way. The most unsettling aspect was the uncertainty of whether she would confront me, or even worse, inform Mr. Carter. I might face the loss of my job, perhaps even jeopardize my entire career. The remainder of the day was consumed by a tight knot in my stomach, rendering me unable to concentrate on anything at all. Whenever Margaret walked by, a tightness gripped my chest. My thoughts raced through every possible scenario. What if she spoke to him? What if I were summoned to the boss's office and ended up losing my job over a silly joke? I attempt to maintain my composure, yet each time Margaret strolled past, it felt as though my heart momentarily halted. She appeared unchanged, yet an unsettling sense lingered within me, whispering that I had just committed a grave error. It wasn't merely the case that I had uttered something unsuitable. It was the very essence of her having heard it. As the day drew to a close, I hurriedly exited the office, scarcely pausing to bid farewell to anyone. My mind was engulfed by the events that had just unfolded. I realized I needed to exercise greater caution in her presence from this point forward. But what if she simply released it? Perhaps it didn't hold much significance for her. Perhaps she would choose not to mention it at all. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood that this was just the beginning of something much larger. A shift was undeniably on the horizon. I found myself uncertain about my readiness for the impending events. The following morning, I arose with an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. I found myself revisiting the events of yesterday over and over in my mind. Margaret catching wind of my silly joke. The manner in which she gazed at me. The uncomfortable stillness that ensued. I had wished that perhaps, just perhaps, everything would settle down. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood it wouldn't be so straightforward. Upon entering the office, the palpable tension in the atmosphere was unmistakable. I somewhat anticipated that someone would take me aside and scold me, yet nothing occurred. Silence enveloped the room. No one even glanced my way in a peculiar manner. At the very least, not in my presence. As I sat at my desk, striving to concentrate on my tasks, she entered the room. Margaret appeared even more polished than usual, clad in her signature sharp business attire. As she strolled by my desk, her attention appeared elsewhere, yet I caught a subtle change in her gait. She recognized my presence. I sensed it. I compelled myself to maintain focus, fixating on my computer screen. Yet, I sensed her gaze lingering on me as she walked past. I feigned ignorance. Suddenly, I felt my phone vibrate. A message had arrived from her. I stood still, my heart pounding in my chest. I swiftly surveyed the surroundings of the office. No one appeared to notice, yet I could sense the sweat beginning to bead on my palms. I opened the message, a knot tightening in my stomach. May we have a conversation? Currently in my workspace. The words struck me with overwhelming force. This was the moment. She intended to inform Mr. Carter. I was finished. There was no turning back at this point. I couldn't act as if my words had never left my lips. I wished to erase the message from my mind, to act as if it had never crossed my path, yet I found myself unable to do so. I had reached a point of no return. I rose and made my way to her office, striving to maintain my poise. My legs felt as if they were crafted from rubber, while my mind whirled with a multitude of thoughts. I tapped gently on the door before entering the room. Margaret sat at her desk, her face a mask of inscrutability. She glanced up from her screen, gesturing for me to take a seat. Brett, she stated, her tone steady yet resolute, regarding yesterday. I found myself at a loss for words. The words lodged in my throat. I began to speak, intending to express my regret, but she lifted her hand to silence me. I'm not upset with you, Brett, she said, a faint smile playing on her lips, but there's something you need to grasp. One must tread lightly with their words in this place. I nodded, attempting to absorb her words. I understand. I ought not to have. Once more, she cut me off. Your apology wasn't necessary. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I perceived a depth in her gaze that transcended mere professionalism. Something else lingered in the air. A unique perspective. There was an elusive quality that I struggled to define. I caught your joke yesterday, she said, her voice dropping now, and I have to admit. It sparked my curiosity. I took a deep breath. I had no idea what I was walking into, but this certainly wasn't it. My stomach churned as I struggled to comprehend her words. Did she feel anger? Was she being playful with me? Thoughts surged through my mind. Intrigued? I echoed, still attempting to comprehend. She smiled once more, her lips curving gently at the edges. You mentioned that you would ask me out if I were available. Well, I'm in a relationship, but it's not quite fulfilling either. I gazed at her, bewildered. Was she expressing what I believed she was expressing? Excuse me, could you clarify that? She leaned in a bit, her voice softening to a near whisper. I believe there's more to you than meets the eye, Brett, and you might be astonished by the possibilities that could unfold if you embraced a bolder approach. I stood still, unable to move. Was she being playful with me? Or was this merely a bizarre, distorted iteration of a power struggle? The atmosphere was thick with tension, a feeling I hadn't anticipated. She paused for a moment, then straightened in her chair, saying, I'm not suggesting that anything will occur. However, I want to assure you that I have listened to you, and I am not angry. Consider your words carefully before you express them next time, alright? I nodded, my thoughts swirling rapidly. I felt the urge to inquire about her meaning, to grasp the situation fully, yet an instinct warned me that pressing her further might not be wise. I stood up, offered a brief thank you, and exited her office, my mind still spinning from the discussion we had. As I strolled back to my desk, my mind was a tempest of ideas. Margaret was not merely dismissing me. She felt no anger. Indeed, it seemed as though she was captivated. But what was the significance of that? Uncertainty clouded my thoughts, and an unsettling sense lingered that complexities were on the horizon. Throughout the day, I attempted to concentrate on my tasks, yet my thoughts continually wandered back to that discussion. A transformation had occurred, an alteration that I sensed would soon demand my attention. The days following that discussion with Margaret felt like a haze. I was at a loss for how to interpret it. Her serene, yet slightly whimsical demeanor had completely disarmed me. One moment, she seemed completely unfazed, and the next, it felt as though we were caught in a game whose rules were a mystery to me. She never mentioned it again, yet I sensed the shift each time she walked by my desk or paused to engage in a brief conversation. Her smile radiated a unique warmth now, one that sent butterflies fluttering in my stomach. She frequently inquired about my day or offered insights on a project I was engaged in. It was amicable, undoubtedly, yet an undercurrent of tension always seemed to hover in the atmosphere. Initially, I attempted to brush it off. I reassured myself that I was merely overanalyzing the situation. Ultimately, Margaret was showing kindness. She was the spouse of my superior, and I needed to maintain a professional demeanor. Yet, whenever she engaged in conversation with me, I sensed her gaze lingering a fraction too long, her tone carrying an intimacy that felt slightly out of place. The incessant echo of our conversation made it difficult to concentrate on my tasks. Whenever I noticed her glancing in my direction, I couldn't help but ponder whether she was recalling my words about inviting her out. I began to understand that perhaps I wasn't the sole one harboring a touch of curiosity. Then arrived the email. As I sat at my desk, immersed in the ceaseless stream of work-related messages, something caught my eye. An email from Margaret titled, "Can we talk later?" My heart raced with excitement. My mind instantly kicked into high gear. What was this regarding? Would she be revealing additional clues? Or worse, was she going to imply that I had overstepped some boundary? With a mix of anticipation and anxiety, I opened the email, my fingers trembling slightly. Brett, I've been reflecting on our conversation from last week. Though we each have our own reasons to tread lightly, you occupy my thoughts incessantly. How about we get together after work? I will arrive at the parking lot at 6 o'clock. Please don't make me wait. I found myself fixed on the screen, thoughts swirling in a chaotic dance. Certainty had finally taken hold of me. This was serious. She was serious about it. She had a determined demeanor. I was at a loss for what to do next. Part of me recognized that I ought to take a step back. I was aware of the potential dangers involved. This might jeopardize everything. Conversely, I couldn't deny that the thought of spending additional moments with Margaret, of being in her presence, of exploring the potential of our connection, was difficult to overlook. The clock caught my eye. The clock struck 4:30 in the afternoon. With an hour and a half still ahead of me before departure, my mind wandered, unable to focus on any task at hand. The email consumed my thoughts, and the prospect of meeting her beyond the confines of the office was both unsettling and thrilling. The remainder of the workday drifted by in a blur. I attempted to focus on my tasks, yet my thoughts continually drifted to the image of her waiting for me outside. I found myself envisioning her in that moment, perhaps dressed in a more relaxed ensemble, one that revealed a hint more of her true self beyond the confines of work. As the clock struck 6 p.m., I slipped on my jacket and made my way to the parking lot. My heart raced, and my palms glistened with sweat. I repeatedly urged myself to retreat, convinced this was a foolish choice, yet my legs seemed to have a mind of their own. The moment I stepped outside, she came into view. Margaret stood beside her car, clad in a simple black dress that seemed to enhance her allure beyond the ordinary. She leaned against the car, arms crossed, her expression suggesting she was anticipating someone, perhaps me. As I approached her, she offered a subtle smile, suggesting that my arrival had been anticipated all along. "You came," she said softly, her voice carrying an almost unnaturally calm and inviting quality. I paused a few feet from her, uncertain of my next move. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. An inexplicable tension filled the air, hinting that this was no ordinary exchange. My instincts were on high alert, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. I was uncertain about what lay ahead, I admitted, my voice rough around the edges. She laughed softly, yet there was no joy in it, only a sense of comprehension that lingered in the air. "It seems we are both aware of the matter at hand, Brett. Let's be honest." The warmth flushed my cheeks. She was indeed correct. We were both aware of the situation at hand. I was torn between the impulse to flee and the curiosity to discover what might unfold. As she moved in, an eerie hush enveloped the surroundings, freezing time for just an instant. The only sound was the far-off murmur of traffic and the gentle whisper of the wind. "There's no need to feel anxious," she said, her voice dropping to a softer tone. "I understand my path, and you do as well." I felt the urge to express myself, to articulate my thoughts, yet the words eluded me. I found myself completely immersed in the experience. Margaret moved in closer once more, and in that moment, I found myself unable to resist. In an instant, I was there, just inches away from her, our faces almost touching. My heart raced within me, and it seemed as though the universe had shrunk to encompass only the two of us. I felt a sense of caution wash over me as I whispered, yet deep down, I questioned my own conviction. She smiled once more, a subtle, understanding smile. "You're correct, we ought to be," yet in silence, she bridged the gap between us. Her lips grazed mine for a fleeting moment, delicate and hesitant, yet it was enough to awaken every fiber of my being. As she withdrew, her gaze met mine, a silent inquiry reflected in her eyes. "This is merely the start, Brett. Let's see where this journey takes us," she murmured. I stood there, taken aback, uncertain of what lay ahead, yet I couldn't ignore it. A change had occurred, and I realized that from this moment forward, everything would be different. The days following that encounter with Margaret seemed to dissolve into a haze, as though I were ensnared in a peculiar, distorted dream. I repeatedly reassured myself that it was merely a kiss, nothing of consequence, yet beneath the surface, I understood it held greater significance. Despite my attempts to persuade myself that I had erred, an undeniable thrill lingered within me, refusing to fade away after that moment. It was one of those moments you wish you could erase from memory, yet every detail relentlessly resurfaced in your thoughts. The kiss lingered on my lips, her gaze piercing through me, and the way she retreated, challenging me to make a move, echoed in my mind endlessly. That week at the office, everything feels changed. She didn't shy away from me, yet an unspoken tension lingered between us whenever we crossed paths. Each time we encountered one another in the office, an odd, silent connection lingered in the air between us. The surroundings seemed to dissolve, creating a cocoon for just the two of us, a hidden truth shared only between us. However, the strangest aspect was that it wasn't solely the kiss that left me feeling unsettled, it was the way Margaret began to behave. She would approach my desk, feigning normalcy, inquiring about work, yet there lingered an unmistakable, electric tension between us. Her tone was gentle, her words hung in the air, and her eyes, oh, her eyes were captivating. It felt like she was testing my readiness for whatever she had in mind for the next moment. I found it difficult to concentrate at work. Each task seemed like a precarious balancing act, where every step was taken with caution, haunted by the fear of missteps and the consequences that could follow if anyone realized I had transcended the role of an ordinary employee. I was more than just Brett, the man who completed his tasks and returned home when the day was done. I found myself in a situation where I had kissed my boss's wife, and that reality loomed over me, casting a shadow that made everything feel exceptionally delicate. Then, on Thursday afternoon, the message arrived. "Let's gather at our regular spot this evening at 7 p.m. Please don't keep me waiting. I reread the message several times, my heart pounding with anticipation. The familiar location was a hidden park close to the office, a place that would go unnoticed by most. Yet, following the kiss, everything seemed to shift significantly. A voice within me urged to turn back, warning that this was perilous, that I was jeopardizing it all. Yet, simultaneously, my body was already in motion, my heart racing as I recognized that Margaret was pulling me in further than I had ever planned. I simply gave in without a second thought. I was unable to. As the clock struck 7 p.m., I found myself parked in the lot of the park, the gentle hum of my car's engine filling the quiet air as I waited. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, a storm of anxiety swirling in my stomach. I found myself pondering what she desired from me, what this signified. Was this merely a fleeting moment? Or was she in search of something deeper? Was I in search of something deeper? As I lingered in that moment, doubts began to swirl within me, until my gaze fell upon her. Margaret approached my car, clad in a straightforward black jacket and jeans. Yet, her demeanor was anything but straightforward. She exuded assurance and poise, as if she possessed a clear understanding of her actions. As she settled into the car, an overwhelming silence enveloped the space. Silence enveloped us. The moment we found ourselves in felt as though it had transcended the limits of language. She was the one to shatter the stillness first. "Are you really going to back out at this point?" she inquired, her tone steady, with a hint of playfulness. I was at a loss for words. I felt the need to express my confusion, to convey that everything was progressing too quickly. But instead, I merely nodded, my throat constricted. "I didn't think so," she said softly, her hand reaching across the seat to rest on my arm. The contact sparked a surge within me, and at that moment, I realized I had lost all grip on the unfolding events. She leaned in, her lips grazing my ear as she murmured softly. "This situation poses risks for us both. Yet, it seems so perfect, wouldn't you agree?" I couldn't refute it. It felt right, in a manner I couldn't quite articulate. I had been striving to maintain my professionalism, yet Margaret had overstepped a boundary, and I had unwittingly followed her across it. I glanced at her, my heart racing wildly within me. "What is it that you seek, Margaret?" I inquired, my voice gravelly. She offered me a slow, knowing smile. "I'm curious to explore the limits of our discretion. I seek to understand whether this is merely a game, or if it holds deeper significance." I was at a loss for words in that moment. What was I meant to express? This was an unprecedented situation for me. My thoughts urged me to retreat, to maintain my distance and safeguard my heart, yet my body betrayed me, inching closer to her as the boundary between right and wrong faded with each fleeting moment. She extended her hand once more, her fingertips gliding softly over my jawline. The caress was gentle, nearly ethereal, yet it carried an undeniable weight, as if she were marking her territory in a manner I couldn't overlook. "You've had me on your mind, haven't you?" she spoke in a gentle whisper. I nodded, unable to conceal it any longer. "Indeed," I murmured. She leaned in once more, and this time, the kiss was bold and assured. It was ravenous, brimming with desire, and I discovered myself reacting with the same fervor. My hands glided to her waist, drawing her nearer. Her breath brushed against my skin, igniting a palpable heat between us. As she finally drew back, her gaze met mine, carrying a weight of seriousness. "This alters the entire landscape, Brett," she remarked. "Are you prepared for that?" Though I lacked a response, the moment our eyes met, a singular truth resonated within me. The point of no return had been reached. The ensuing weeks unfolded in a haze of clandestine gatherings, fleeting encounters, and escalating suspense. Margaret and I had ventured into territory that neither of us could undo. Yet, as the days went by, the burden of the circumstances started to press down on me with increasing intensity. What began as a light-hearted, impulsive jest had transformed into a perilous situation, one that jeopardized not just my professional life, but my very identity. The tension swelled within me, akin to a balloon gradually expanding. I repeatedly reassured myself that I could manage it, that I could maintain everything in order. Yet, whenever Margaret appeared at my desk or sent me a message with that familiar playful tone, a wave of anxiety would wash over me once more. I was aware it was incorrect. I realized it couldn't last. And yet, I found myself unable to turn my back and leave. Yet, on that particular night, everything felt distinct. I had ultimately arrived at my limit. The hour was late, and the office stood almost deserted. I remained behind to complete some tasks when I noticed her approaching, exuding confidence and grace as always. Her gaze met mine, and for an instant, the world around us vanished. Her smile hinted at a knowing confidence, as if she was fully aware of the effect she had on me. She leaned against the doorframe, her voice low and inviting as she mentioned working late. I didn't make any effort to conceal it. The tension in my gut was more intense than it had ever been. "Sure," I murmured, hardly glancing up. She stepped into my office, gently shutting the door behind her. "You know, I've been contemplating," she remarked, folding her arms across her chest. "We've been at this for some time, yet it seems as though we're caught in a repetitive cycle. It feels as though we're both putting on a facade, acting as if this isn't significant, but deep down, we know it truly is." I nodded slowly, the air thick with unspoken words. "I acknowledged your point. I've been contemplating that as well." She approached, the scent of her perfume enveloping the space. "So, why not drop the act?" Her voice had taken on a gentler tone, imbued with a sense of urgency. "Why don't we fully commit?" My heart began to race. This was the moment, the one I had both feared and looked forward to simultaneously. "Could you clarify what you mean?" I inquired, attempting to calm my breath. Margaret smiled, yet a steely resolve flickered in her gaze. "I'm considering walking away from it all. There's a possibility I might part ways with James, my husband. It's possible to walk away from your job. We could escape together. At last, we can embrace the life we've been quietly yearning for." I gazed at her, the impact of her words washing over me like a tidal wave. This was completely unforeseen. I had always viewed it as a fleeting moment, a chapter we would both close without a second glance. Yet now she was requesting something far more significant, something I wasn't ready to face. "I can't do that," I said, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "That was never my desire. I never intended to ruin everything merely for a brief encounter." Margaret's expression grew steely, and for an instant, a chill flickered in her gaze. "Are you really just going to turn your back and leave? After all that we've experienced together?" My heart raced, and a weight settled in my chest. Indeed, I mentioned holding firm in my convictions. This way of living is no longer sustainable for me. This is us, it's destined to fail. She stepped back, her gaze sweeping over my face as if probing for any hint of uncertainty. "Are you being serious?" I gave a slight nod. "I exist." I erred, Margaret. I allowed the situation to escalate, and now I must make amends. For my own purposes. To you. For the two of us. A lengthy silence lingered between us. Margaret remained still, her arms relaxed at her sides, her expression a mystery. For a brief instant, I feared she would erupt, that she would blame me for her sense of betrayal. Yet, she inhaled deeply, allowing her features to relax ever so slightly. "Very well," she murmured softly, as though accepting the choice with a sense of surrender. "It seems we've both found what we were looking for in this, haven't we?" I nodded once more, sensing a burden ease from my shoulders. Although the circumstances were less than perfect. Indeed, I maintained a steady tone in my voice. "I suppose that's the case." Margaret paused at the threshold, her hand lingering on the doorknob. She averted her gaze, yet her words carried a gentle warmth as she spoke. "Your decision is spot on, Brett. Make sure to remember that." I observed her departure, the door softly clicking closed in her wake. In that instant, it all seemed irrevocable. The following day, I entered the office just as I would on any typical day. Yet, it felt distinct this time. After much contemplation, I arrived at my conclusion, and while it posed challenges, I was certain it was the correct choice. Margaret and I never exchanged another word, not regarding the events that transpired between us. I maintained my distance, immersed myself in my tasks, and forged ahead. Margaret chose to remain by James's side. She chose to stay with him, and I was left in the dark about the fate of their marriage. However, I did catch wind that she was dedicating an increasing amount of time at the office, perhaps a bit excessively. Yet, I chose not to glance back. The lesson was straightforward. At times, it becomes necessary to step back from situations that appear correct in the present, even when it feels as though you've just complicated everything. Such is life. Embrace your decisions and forge ahead, regardless of the challenges that may arise. I focused on my own path, absorbed the lessons from my missteps, and made sure not to get caught up in anything beyond my grasp once more. The conclusion of that chapter marked the beginning of a fresh journey, a lesson etched in my memory.